As all this is happening in Gaza, ceasefire negotiations are still underway. Qatar and Egypt have issued a joint statement saying they're intensifying efforts to solve points of contention in ceasefire talks. Hamas has called for changes to the latest version of a ceasefire plan, which has been backed by the US and Israel. Al Jazeera has obtained the response put forth by Hamas late on Saturday. The draft includes a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza. Under the deal, 10 Israeli captives would be released in 3 stages. The bodies of 18 deceased captives would also be returned. Hamas's proposal would secure the unconditional entry of aid into Gaza through the UN and its agencies. It also states that negotiations on a permanent ceasefire would begin on day 1, and Hamas wants the Trump administration to guarantee the talks towards reaching a final settlement to the war. Joining us is Al Jazeera's senior political analyst, Marwan Bishara from Paris. Good to see you, Marwan. I want to pick up on something that you said when we last spoke an hour ago. You were saying that negotiations should continue to find a solution for the sake of the people in Gaza. But given the impasse that we have now, with Hamas wanting concrete measures that any ceasefire will lead to the end to the war, how can the two sides overcome this?
I actually don't see a way out except if Netanyahu gives up on some of his conditions, because I think Hamas's position now is at its bare minimum, meaning already it's showing signs of despair. And because of the horrific price that the people in Gaza are paying, it has been willing to make a good number of concessions. But I think maybe it has reached a limit. In the meanwhile, I think while probably the likes of Steve Witkoff are trying to bridge the differences, trying to find a formula out, my sense is that we are no longer in the good cop, bad cop logic between Witkoff and Netanyahu, but rather Netanyahu is now playing Witkoff, embarrassing Witkoff. And I think it is, and here I'm speaking analytically, not based on any information, that perhaps Netanyahu is trying to weaken Witkoff because Witkoff is way ahead on the talks on Iran nuclear deal in a way that does not please Netanyahu. So I think Netanyahu is weaponizing the diplomacy in Palestine, not only to continue with the bombings, but also to discredit Steve Witkoff's negotiations with the Iranians.
But where does Donald Trump come in all of this? Because Steve Witkoff is only Trump's Middle East envoy. Donald Trump is still the president of the US.
The thing is about Trump is that if someone spoke to him yesterday or he watched something on Fox News last night, he probably would say something. I think he has so much on his hands, and he doesn't, of course, read very much or follow international affairs that closely. I don't think he is paying attention. I think, largely speaking, he's preoccupied with the trade issues, with the domestic issues. And this is the last thing on his mind. He's definitely not a person with a plan. He is not a person with a pen. It's not like he's going to be going over texts and underlining and cutting and pasting and so on and so forth. Not at all. What we know for sure, Elizabeth, is that Hamas agreed to the last proposal by Steve Witkoff that apparently was blessed by Trump, which involves a good number of elements that Netanyahu rejected. So Steve backed off, and I don't think Trump is paying attention to these little details. So what happened is that Steve Witkoff, so as not to be subjected to the wrath of the Israelis, decided to change course and be a bit more responsive to the Israeli conditions. And hence, of course, Hamas came at the low end of it. And now we are in this complex situation. So it doesn't seem to me that Trump cares very much. It doesn't seem to me that he is knowledgeable enough and certainly not familiar with the day-to-day negotiations.
And what then does his lack of attention to this issue, his lack of attention to detail, mean for Netanyahu and his plans for Gaza? We have seen how much the Israeli military has increased its attacks across Gaza recently.
What is paradoxical here is that ever since Trump made his kind of farcical vision about Gaza free of Gazans in order to be turned into beach property for people of the world, I think Trump sort of forgot about the idea. As I said, he probably just, came up in a conversation or something. But since then, Netanyahu has been playing that game whereby after every declaration he says, but we have to fulfill Trump's vision. There is no Trump vision. Trump just said something in a press conference. I don't think he meant it. As I said, he's preoccupied with other things. He didn't think it through. It didn't go through the process in the National Security Council, at the White House, or in coordination with the State Department. None of that. He just came up with the idea. He thought it was a good idea, and that was the end of that. But since then, because he's not paying attention to details, basically Netanyahu is running away with the shop. He, under the pretext of fulfilling Trump's vision, and Trump is not exactly telling him, forget about that or anything of that nature. So Netanyahu is working day in, day out in making Gaza uninhabitable, as our correspondent just said, through the bombings and the starvations and the weaponization of aid and so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, that is his goal. And if he succeeds, then it's fulfilling Trump's vision. If he doesn't, the war continues.
And where we haven't seen any pressure on Israel from the US, we have seen Israel's European allies be more critical recently than they have in the past. Do you see this having any impact? Do you see them taking any action?
There is some impact, there's no doubt. It's certainly putting the Israelis on the defensive. Yesterday, President Macron of France here made a kind of a sharper declaration or statement telling the Israelis, if you don't shape up, we're going to have to take even more urgent measures against Israel. Not sure if he will follow through, but clearly something's coming up at the United Nations later this month, where we expect a recognition of Palestine by greater number of countries. And the French and the Europeans are now sort of changing their minds a bit about what Netanyahu is doing. They don't understand, in fact, what he's doing. If that's fighting Hamas, it's not. It's starving the people in Gaza. And more people that support Netanyahu and Israel are backing out now because they say we cannot live with the pictures of children dying, with children starving in Gaza. And that is something that, of course, leaving Israel, as I said, defensive. But instead of learning the lessons, Israel is lashing out against its allies in Europe and elsewhere.
That is our senior political analyst, Marwan Bishara, live in Paris. Thank you, Marwan.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.